We've invented just about every possible explanation for the true cause of the Salem witch trials, except we overlook the obvious one. This is just what witch hunts look like, and not like the myths and folklore that have been developed about the witchcraft panic, which we'll be looking at today on Salem Witch Trials Daily. I'm Josh Hutchinson.
And I'm Sarah Jack, and I'm going to start off with the most obvious one. I hope they're all obvious, but they were not witches. They were innocent, and they had not signed a contract with the devil. There's no devil contract.
Yeah, so far, it's been 330 years since these witch trials, and nobody's come up with the devil's book that they talked about all the time. And, another thing about the so-called witches, the suspects, they weren't all old hags. That's a stereotype that we have about what witches were, when in reality, all ages of girls and women and boys and men were arrested in the Salem witch trials.
This next one might surprise you. We don't think the word hysteria actually describes what was happening. But we do always hear that word. It's a labeling that minimizes the real human behavioral factors and decision-making involved.
In the past, they blamed the devil for what happened. They called it a delusion of Satan. Now we blame their minds, saying that they were all hysterical. There was a mass hysteria. But really, they were just like us. They were simply people who were afraid for their safety and their children's safety, especially.
It was a panic, but it's not hysterical to use the courts to seek justice, and that's what they were doing.
And there's no silver bullet to explain the Salem witch trials. As we mentioned up top, people have been busy coming up with every explanation under the sun. And it's not just one thing. There were many factors. We talked about this the other day. We were talking about some of the causes of the Salem witch trials.
There were no land grabs. No accusers got the land of the people they were accusing.
The afflicted people were not afflicted by ergot fungus or anything like LSD. They had a mysterious affliction that may have been psychological. We don't know the nature of it. And frankly, it's not as important to me to understand what was causing their behaviors as it is to understand what was causing the behavior of the supposedly sober adults that were making the decisions to pursue these cases and hang people. But we know it's not ergot because, well, everyone who ate the bread that was affected by ergot, it comes from infected rye grains, this fungus growing on them. And everyone who would have eaten a bread loaf made from infected grains should have got ergot. So when a family's sitting around the table, they all were eating the same bread and they probably should have all got sick.
The records also report that the afflictions were coming and going depending on if the alleged witch was near. So that is not a disease response.
Another thing that we want to look at is this whole notion of demon possession and bewitchment. In the colonial period, there was a real fine line. The words were not at all interchangeable as we sometimes see them used in writings today about the witch trials. Might refer to an afflicted person as being a possessed person or a bewitched person. But back then, the difference of meanings between those two words really, really matter. Because if you were possessed by a demon, that was something that basically you had sinned and opened the door for a demon to come into you, where bewitchment involved a human attacking you with witchcraft, and therefore that human had to be dealt with to solve your problem.
Oh, here's one. Maybe this should have been off the top. They were hanged, not burned. And we know that because it was a felony, not heresy.
Yeah. Another thing about the accusations is that This was Puritans making accusations against other Puritans. This is mostly people who went to the meeting house together to worship services and turned on each other for whatever reason.
Let's talk about Tituba.
Yeah, Tituba was an enslaved woman in Samuel Parris's household. She is not known to have practiced any magic except one time she baked a witch cake under the instructions from an English neighbor, Mary Sibley. So she didn't even know how to do this. She had to be taught how to do it. So her magical education was not up to snuff if she had one at all, which she didn't. And she never taught kids magic. There was not a circle of girls that met in the woods.
Another story opener that's been a go-to for a lot of creative artists and writers is the Venus glass. Which girls were using this water and egg to divine their futures? Which Salem Witch Trial girls was it? One. It was one. But was it even in Salem? Do we know that for sure?
We don't know. There's only one reference to this happening. It's in John Hale's A Modest Inquiry into the Nature of Witchcraft, which was published several years after the witch trials. And he did not bother to name the person involved.
The last thing we're going to talk about today is a really important part of American culture, pop culture, but it tells us a made-up story, and that's the Crucible.
Yeah, the Crucible it's an important piece of literature because it introduces people to the witch trials. Unfortunately, it has a few factual errors. It wasn't intended to be a statement of fact. It was intended to be a drama that elicited certain emotions in people, and it does that really well. There's three things we want to highlight today. There's many more. We could spend longer than the actual play lasts just breaking it down. But Abigail Williams was not a teenager as she is in the movie. She was actually 11 years old. And she was not a maid for John Proctor. She just worked in the Samuel Parris household for her uncle. And John Proctor was not a 30-something man like Daniel Day-Lewis was. He was actually in his 60s. So there's no evidence at all of any kind of inappropriate relationship between 60-something John Proctor and 11-year-old Abigail Williams. Thank goodness. And then another thing that comes out is that confessions, people are given the choice of you confess and live, or you stick to your guns and you die. And that wasn't a true choice that they had because confessions did not spare lives. Many of the confessors actually were condemned to die, but they were reprieved by the governor just in time because the witch trials ended before they got to them, basically. So tomorrow we're going to be talking about what witches were and how the devil played a role in that through this diabolical pact that we talked about at the front of this episode. Not real thing, but in people's minds, it was real at the time.